So you're at the end of quite a long day, I would imagine, and you're all probably feeling a little bit fatigued and a little bit brain dead and, God, why is there another talk on now? I want to get home and get the pub. Well, anyway, I'm going to be quite short and to the point. But I just really want to wrap this day up because I think it's been an incredible day just to get a sense of the breadth of what's going on in terms of technology in our industry. And it's all very easy when you're living and breathing technology every day like I do to sort of take it a bit for granted. But then when you actually see a series of presentations and quite in-depth ones with the detail of what's going on, it really brings it back home to you that there's a hell of a lot going on, and it's a really, really interesting place to be at the moment. So I was sort of sitting where you are today 35 years ago when I was just starting my career in crop technology. And that was a very different place as it is today. So, for example, 35 years ago, there wasn't such a thing as a laptop, a PC, Windows. There was no internet. There was no mobile phones. There was no GPS. There was no sat-navs. Certainly no driverless tractors. We just had Channel 4 introduced. So we went from 3 channels on the TV to 4. And we thought that was quite a revolution. There's no Sky TV. There's no remote sensing. There's not such a thing as a CD. There was little cassette tapes. Used to get tangled up and snap. There's nothing like genetic sequencing, genetic breeding for marker analysis. Nothing like that at all. And that's all just happened. And it'd be really, really interesting to be a fly on the wall in this room in another 35 years' time and actually hear what the issues of the day are then. I think it would take a brave person to try and predict that. So I hope today has given you an insight as to what's going on, a bit of a taste. And hopefully it'll also just reinforce the point you've joined a very, very interesting, exciting industry doing what you're going to be doing in terms of arable technology. Because crop science, plant science, automation, precision farming, all of that stuff is really, really good fun. And it is game-changing. And it must be great, hopefully you're feeling that, to be part of that sort of revolution. So I'm just going to finish off with a few little bits and pieces just to sum it up. But if that apple was the Earth, that blue spot in the middle of it is about the amount of land that is available for crop production and agriculture globally. There's an awful lot of the Earth, planet Earth, whether it's seas, mountains, prairie, tundra, desert, that you can't do anything with. So it really means if you look at the world population, and it's changed from about 2.5 billion back in the 50s to predicting 7.5 billion in 2020. Now, the amount of land that we have available for cropping hasn't changed. Suddenly, we haven't drained the sea and just dredged up a few more tens of thousands of hectares, or suddenly irrigated great chunks of the Sahara Desert we can now grow crops on. That's not happening. So the amount of land is actually pretty well fixed at about 1.5 billion hectares. So it's a very simple calculation when you look at the growth in population, the fixed asset that we've got in land, that each hectare of land has to churn out more production to keep that number of people fed and in a lifestyle that you have all become accustomed to. When there's always food on the table, there's always bread in the shop. If we look at the real finite resource, which is the soil that we have available to us to grow our crops, then if you look at an analogy that the depth from the center of the Earth to the outside of the Earth is about 6.4 million meters. If you look at how much the soil represents, it's about 1,000th of a coat of paint on the London Eye, to put it in scale scenario. So in other words, we are dealing with a very, very finite resource that needs to be managed well, and that is what we're relying on to produce all the food that we've just been talking about on that little blue spot on that apple. So it just hopefully emphasizes the need that we really need to be good at what we're doing. If you look at where the threats are, I'm not going to go through this slide because it's been very eloquently put across this morning by some of the speakers. Resistance, regulation, they're all really, I think personally, the two biggest threats to crop production. But we've also got other things like new invasive species. There's a black stem rust, UG99, that's very common in Africa, other parts of the globe. And there is now more or less an assumption that it will reach Europe. And that is quite a devastating disease. Fortunately, a lot of the modern chemistry will control it, but it's a different disease to contend with. We've also got a Spanish slug that is coming into, I have heard it's in the UK. It's a very small number, but they buck the trend that they're not controlled by the normal slug pellet chemistry that we've got, metaldehyde, ferrous sulfate. They're quite big, and they eat an awful lot of crop. So that final threat to UK production is very relevant to you guys sitting in this room, and that is attracting high caliber people that have got a real interest in crop technology and also retaining you, because what we want to do is give you careers and so that you can see your own personal development in this area and this career space, because there's a lot to go on with. And if you look at what that list is, I've just listed a few here that we're talking to different researchers about. I wouldn't say that we'll get in as Velcourt into any of these in any great detail, but it's very good to be kept abreast of developments. So things like peptide-specific biological insecticides that will target a single species of aphid, take them out but leave everything else. RNAi, so it disrupts cell division in target species, and there's a team at York doing RNAi work on slugs as a way of controlling them. Streptomyces cereal fungicide, so taking what is a natural Streptomyces from the soil, fermenting it, changing it into a fungicide to kill diseases. Sounds very holistic and very biological, and it seems to work, because Dow are just launching the first one of those probably in about 2 years' time. Remote crop monitoring for disease and weed management. We're doing a lot of work with drones looking at that at the moment, which is trying to look at pre-symptomatic disease identification. So just knowing that plant has caught a cold and not feeling too good before you see its runny nose, and then you have to go in and do something about it. If you can go in there very, very early, you can actually make a big impact and probably use less product, less input cost to control the problem. Biosensors, we're working with a group, in fact we've got a meeting this week up in Dundee, looking at a new biosensor for detecting potato blight. That's not actually looking at leaves, looking at lesions on leaves, it's sucking the air in for 12 hours, it's then analysing the DNA of the spores that air contains, and if the machine detects the spore or the DNA of potato blight, you will get a reading, which will be sent back by a phone mobile signal to a portal, so you can actually see what the threat of blight is in your crop on that day. There are other groups doing a similar pathogen biosensor for sugar beet diseases and also wheat diseases. There's robotics in, whether that's robotic picking of apples, whether it's weeding in between row crops, that's all coming on board as well. We've got genomics and gene editing going on, actually isolating with the CRISPR-Cas9 technology to the actual bit of gene you don't want. It'll chop it out, and then when you multiply the DNA from that, the undesirable bit is not then replicated and passed down to the subsequent cells. All sorts of seed technology, priming, pelleting, nutrient incorporation, mycorrhizal treated seed, that's all happening to give the crop a better head start. Water use, monitoring and management, because there's no doubt about it that that's going to be a controlled asset going forward. And, if you're ever taking on a new farm that you have got irrigated crops, one of the first questions and lines of inquiry is what are the risks of having your irrigation curtailed or restricted that might affect your crop production. So the water use is a very important thing, and when you're using it, you want to make most efficient use out of it using things like drip irrigation rather than rain guns, which are very inefficient. Lots of alternative crops, pharmaceuticals, modified starch and oil contents. I had a discussion the other day with a startup group looking at cannabinoids that were trying to grow cannabis in a way that they could actually get the cannabinoids maximized that actually shrunk cancer tumors. And they think that in about 18 months to 24 months, that cannabis will be legalized for medicinal purposes in the UK, and they want to be part of that journey. And then finally, social science. That is actually a new technology that we really must develop because it's something we've ignored at our peril. And you know, the GM fiasco is a very, very good real-life example of if you don't get it right with the public, you don't stand a chance. So if we can get on the side of the public, launching some of these new technologies and actually put across the benefits to them of having it, and it's not just going into the farmer's pocket or the manufacturer's pocket, but there's a real benefit to the consumer, we will get it through. But we need the help of social scientists, and that's their area of specialism that we need to engage with. So most importantly, we need you guys. We need you to really step up to the mark, challenge what we're doing, think wide-angled, think of alternatives, think of new solutions. Let's try and test them, and let's get on there and get some of these real big problems under our belts and under our control. So I'm going to stop there, but thanks for your attention, and I really wish you all the best going forwards. Thank you.